Hello and welcome to the Love of the Star podcast with the Super Bowl winning scout, the champion, Cowboy scout, Mr. Brian Broaddus, and myself, Eric Chiafalo. It's great to have you in as the Cowboys have announced their 10th head coach in franchise history, Mr. Brian Schottenheimer. And as the week went on last week, I know we had a Friday episode, Broaddus, and all signs were pointing to Shotty. I'm still trying to gather myself. I can't believe this is all real, but they introduced him yesterday at the press conference, and now it's all things to go. The Brian Schottenheimer era has begun. So welcome to the show. Great to see you. How are we feeling about Shotty?
Well, first, before we get started, a very happy birthday to you as well, young man, and hope you have many more. Yeah, you know, the Brian Schottenheimer, there was a lot in the Jerry Jones press conference yesterday, and I felt like that Jerry and Steven were really trying to call out members of the media. I think you, me, our radio station, people have talked about comfort and all this stuff like that. They made it a big point that, you know, hey, I'm going outside of my comfort zone of hiring this guy. And, you know, but yeah, you could be. You're tying it together of I'm hiring a head coach with no head coaching experience. You know, you've done it before. You did it with Jason Garrett, you know, no head coaching experience there. So it's not like something that, you know, it's totally unusual for you. Jason Garrett, like I said, he didn't have any head coaching experience before you made the hire there. So I think they're getting a little sensitive about the criticisms, the banter back and forth, whether it's in the media, the fan base, about how this hire was gone about. Familiarity is important to the Joneses. They tend to gravitate towards those people that they know, and if they don't know somebody, they will make a call. They will, Jerry Jones is, we've talked about it a bunch here on Love of the Star, how Jerry will pick up the phone and he'll call Pete Carroll, or he'll call Steve Spurrier, or he'll call Barry Switzer. That's what Jerry Jones does. And even though it's so funny, even though they had Shotty in the building, Jerry picks up the phone and calls about Brian Schottenheimer. Oh, okay. So, I think that, to me, not surprising. And I do believe this, Eric, that they are doing their very best to try and help their quarterback. And I mean, maybe people out there don't think it's so, well, how do you help him with the same offense? And how do you help him with the same scheme? And how do you help him? It's something that Dak is, there's been times where the scheme has been very, very good for him, but now he's a different player. And I mean, a different player in, there is a lack of mobility there right now, and you brought it up on our show yesterday on 105.3 The Fan and on the G-Bag Nation about, mobile quarterbacks in the playoffs and the ability to run. So to hire a Brian Schottenheimer, you're probably realizing that, hey, we have to call plays this way. You can't go out and maybe get somebody that is going to alter the way that Dak Prescott plays. And all of a sudden it's like, hey, the running aspect of this offense or the scheme with the quarterback is super important. You probably can't hire that guy because they have to adapt their offense to the quarterback they currently have. And I think that's where they feel like that Brian Schottenheimer gives them the best advantage in their minds.
Yeah, that's a big thing moving forward with the final four quarterbacks in this year's conference champions, the conference championship games. You had Mahomes, Allen, Daniels, and Hurts, and those were the top four most efficient scrambling quarterbacks in the NFL this year. So I don't think it's by accident that those guys were able to go as far as they did. Of course, those teams, especially when you talk about the Chiefs and the Eagles, well-rounded teams, even the Bills to some extent. Jaden Daniels was ridiculous with his efficiency on the scrambles, but that's not an element that you're going to be getting out of Dak anymore.
No.
So that is certainly a disadvantage, and having an offensive coordinator who understands how to build an offense around more of an immobile quarterback is obviously hugely important. I just wonder how much of a disconnect do you think there was from what Mike McCarthy was trying to do on a Sunday-to-Sunday basis versus what Schottenheimer, because I was excited with, okay, we're moving on from McCarthy. Let's see something new here. Let's see something fresh. We had 10 years basically of Jason Garrett, a half decade of Mike McCarthy. man, I'm ready to see Dak in a different sort of offense. How different do you think this could actually look offense?
Well, this is that's the as they say, the $1 million question, because will it look dramatically different? I there's a side of me that believes that there are things that Brian Schottenheimer wanted to do. And okay, let me circle back. The one thing that I do know, when Mike McCarthy and Jerry Jones were doing some of their exit interview stuff, both Jerry and Mike agreed that Dak, the lack of mobility, could potentially be a problem, and that they were going to have to tailor around that. Okay, so that means strong running game and all this stuff. So you hire a coach, and say a Brian Schottenheimer, who has a background of running the football. You look at the places that he's been, whether it's Seattle, the Jets, Jacksonville, places like that. It's always been kind of a run first. His father, when I was your age, was in the league, was a guy that was a run first guy, was a very physical run the football type. So it is in his DNA. Now, my hope is there were some things that Brian Schottenheimer saw working when he was with Dan Quinn on the defensive side of the ball, the opportunities he got the last couple of years as the OC, where, man, I would have done that different. I would have done that different. I would have done that different. Now, for example, he's looking at a guy potentially as his offensive coordinator, Clayton Adams, who is from the Arizona Cardinals. Okay, Clayton Adams has a history. If you go through his background, Stanford was a very physical team when he was there as a coach, running the football. The Indianapolis Colts. Now he's at Arizona, a couple of 1,000-yard rushers the last couple of years. A mobile quarterback. Yeah, okay, that's something completely different. But they've had to block for that quarterback that runs all over the place. Clayton Adams, from what I know about him, and again, I'm just trying to tie everything together, how this might look. Yeah. And with Clayton Adams, you're going to get a guy that, that we talk about pin and pulls and things like that with the scheme, the ability to get the ball on the edge, the physical running game. Something really, really, really big for Clayton Adams is versatility. And he is something that's when, and Dallas always talks about that kind of that position flex stuff. This guy seems to take it to a whole nother level. So centers playing guards, guards playing centers, tackles playing both sides, maybe tackles playing his guards. So there's that kind of that flexibility with the thing. He's been able to take rookie offensive linemen, play at a high level. He's taken veteran guys, that they've signed. Maybe they're the right tackle. Nope, we're going to play him at left tackle or right tackle. So there's that kind of versatility. So I think that what we're going to see is that potential with, if you pair him, say you keep Luna Wells as your tight ends coach. Okay, strong offensive line background. Clayton Adams, offensive coordinator, offensive line coach, running guy, versatility guy, physical guy. I think that's what Brian Schottenheimer's trying to look at right now as he's going to make these hires. We'll see what happens with the running back coach position. I don't foresee that position. I don't see that staying. I think they're going to go again outside the building and get somebody else to handle that. So I have a feeling it's going to be a emphasis on running the football, play action game. He even talked about, if you look at the Cowboys on metrics, I know you and I love to talk about metrics on our show, is width of the offense. He's talking about cut splits. Cut splits means condensed. He wants to play a condensed offense. The Dolphins play a condensed offense, run the ball well. San Francisco, condensed offense. They get the receivers involved in the blocking and things like that. So you're talking about him trying to shrink the offense, get blockers in position, be more physical running the football. So there's going to be an opportunity for them, to do that. This draft coming up has got a lot of running backs. You just don't have to focus on Ashton Genty. Second, third, fourth, fifth round, there are running backs that paired with other running backs could do the job for you. So I think this is going to be an offense that he wants to have. It's physical, condensed, but to be able to run the football, play the play action game, let Dak throw from the pocket that way.
Yeah. I mean, Schottenheimer was saying a lot of encouraging things when he was laying out sort of his plan here. All the things you just mentioned, the motion,
Yeah.
and up tempo. That was something that he kept hitting as well. Is just like more tempo. You saw the Commanders find great success with that this year, doing a lot more no huddle stuff and moving. And he described it as sort of like you're almost playing just like pickup basketball at that point, and you're just kind of out there playing. And I think players do like that. But you have to do a lot of things well to be able to pull that off. You have to be able to stay ahead of the sticks, and you can't be running your defense out there like crazy. But yeah, I mean, all that stuff is definitely encouraging. And I'll tell you what, like this guy, Clayton Adams, that you just talked about, Arizona Cardinals, that's a rushing attack that people have been pretty impressed with over the last couple of years. And Petzing, their offensive coordinator, is a guy that's gotten a lot of love. But this dude, Clayton Adams, from what I've read about him, he's a guy that is well respected. And when those lists come out about the top young coaches that are kind of on the rise every year, he's been on that list for the last couple of years. And the Cardinals, I mean, their rushing attack there was a good variety to it. I think that's one of the things you see with these awesome offenses now and these awesome rushing attacks now is they're not just a one-trick pony. Yes, you can have some offensive lines where, hey, your offensive line and your running back are so good, you can just kind of go 2016 Cowboys on them, and you're just better, and you can just push people around. But there's so much nuance now in these rushing attacks where, depending on the front, depending on the defense that week, we could be a zone rushing attack. We could be We could be more physical with the pin and pull, the counter stuff, and the Cardinals have had a wide variety of that. I think that would be a huge hire, because to me, I think Schottenheimer has the desire to want to have a more cutting edge, nuanced offense. But he's also a guy that, I mean, he's been with Mike McCarthy now. He's been with Pete Carroll in the past. Like when he was the offensive coordinator with the Jets, it wasn't like some super widely, a bunch of variations and nuance to the rushing attack. So I think he needs to surround himself with guys that know how to implement it and coach it. And you get a guy like this dude from the Cardinals, I think that could go a long way for you. And filling out that staff, I think, is just going to be of the utmost importance.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, once again, when we have our conversations on our show on G-Bag Nation, we talk about team building all the time. And the one things we always talk about, though, is if I was going to interview a coach and I needed to know who your staff was, I needed to know who was your offensive line coach, who was your quarterback's coach, who was your running back. I need to know those things, because I'm not going to sit there and let you hire a bunch of friends. We saw that in the very first year of the Mike McCarthy administration when he hired Jim Tom Sula and Mike Nolan. And, he brought some guys from Green Bay that ultimately didn't work out here that were let go. So, hiring your friends is not always the best thing. It's nice to have friends, but hiring your friends, you want to hire the best and the brightest. You want to hire guys and gals now in the league that are smarter than you, and I want to believe that with Schottenheimer being 51, 52 years old, that he has an idea. He's seen how these teams are moving the football. He's going to be limited with his quarterback, but that doesn't mean he has to be limited with CeeDee Lamb or this offensive line or any running back that they might draft. This is, I think, a good opportunity. I believe he's seen all the things that set this offense back, and I don't think he wants to continue on. We saw that way too much during the 2024 season, even when Dak Prescott was healthy.
Are you surprised that the Witten stuff doesn't seem to be coming to fruition?
No, I mean, it's it was a very much a kind of a fairy tale. I know myself, I brought it up as a possibility just because the Cowboys we talk about this a lot, and they hate this when we say it, but they're not going anywhere. They're not going to get fired. So you could do things. This is the Dallas Cowboys honestly should have been the first team to get rid of their quarterback, and not pay a guy $40 million or $50 million. They should have been the first one. They should have said, because, when you have a quarterback and you're having to pay him $50 million, it limits really what your team could do unless your quarterback is a rare guy. And I thought with the Cowboys, if when you're going to get fired potentially, you have to go out and say, okay, we got to spend money. We got to find a quarterback. I can't lose my job over this. The Cowboys, they're not going anywhere. So to me, that would have been a great opportunity to say, okay, we're going to reset at quarterback. And we're just going to keep building around. But they've shown also too, I mean, the one thing when you feel like you draft well, you could probably get away with that. But yeah, it's not surprising to me about the Witten thing, really, to be honest with you, because like I said, they're the one team that could do it because they're not going to lose their jobs. But I also want to believe that maybe that Brian Schottenheimer, he probably doesn't want Jason Witten lurking around there. I know I probably wouldn't myself. Right. If I was a head coach, why this love for Witt, love for his press conference is going to be, and you're probably not going to have a press conference, but his announcement of him being a coach on your staff is going to probably outshine anything that you're going to do with your own. And I mean that, like, listen, I'm not trying to be mean or anything about it, but I said hire the best and the brightest. I think there's going to be a place and a time for Jason Witten one day, but I just don't see it right now with the Cowboys.
Yeah, I wonder if it's him still wanting to coach his sons in high school. And
sure, very well could be. He could have turned it down. The really exciting hire would have been, like I say, I know you and I and others were talking about like the Aaron Glenns and the Ben Johnsons and stuff. It was never going to get to that. To me, the exciting hire really would have been hiring Deion Sanders and seeing if Deion Sanders could put together an NFL staff, that could go out and win games, because that he's a leader. The type of person that he is when it comes to standing up in front of his team and talking about what they had to do. That, to me, now we'll see with Schottenheimer. Hey, listen, I've done a lot of research on the Dan Campbell. Go back and look at how they killed Dan Campbell. Look how they killed Dan Quinn. There's coaches that have been hired and have gone on to done some really nice things. When I'm sure that the Los Angeles Rams, when they hired Sean McVay, that was like, what are you doing? What has this guy done? And listen, I'm just saying that from a point of reference. I'm not saying that Brian Schottenheimer is Sean McVay or Dan Campbell. I'm just saying there are plenty of opportunities or plenty of times we've seen where experts like myself have come out and said it's the worst hire in the league, and that guy's gone on and done great things. That's my only point of reference. I'm not trying to say, Brian Schottenheimer's Bill Belichick or Brian Schottenheimer's, Sean McVay. No, I'm just saying there are a lot of people that do get hired in the league, and you scratch your head and you go, wow, how did that guy get a job? Wow, really? They're hiring that guy? And then that guy turns out to be pretty damn good at it.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much so an inexact science. It's like the quarterback evaluations. You right. do all this background work, and you still have no idea how it's going to pan out. I mean, the one that I always think about is the Doug Peterson to Philadelphia. Your guy Doug Peterson.
Yeah.
And that was I remember the head coach hire rankings, and that was last on every list. Like, who's this Doug Peterson guy? And then him and Nick Foles go beat Brady and Belichick in a Super Bowl. So you never really know how this can work.
It happens, Eric. It happens, and I think, you don't have to like it, but, and I don't think there's a lot of people that are mad at Brian Schottenheimer.
Right.
I think there's a lot of people that are mad at Jerry and Stephen Jones. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of people that are mad at them because, they're asking something different. Give us something different, and it's not, we always like to use the phrase small sample size. It ain't a small sample size anymore. It's like the damn Grand Canyon. It's that deep and that wide, and, it's not a small sample size. It's a big crater that you're dealing with right now between, you're being in a championship setting. And if your goal is every year just to win the division and get in the playoffs, then you probably should be out of the business. You probably should be out of the business doing that. That's not to me, that's, your idea is to go and try and win one of those trophies. That's your whole game plan, and then if you're not doing everything to exhaust everything you could do to get one of those, then you're really not. You're really not. I'll say this real quick if I could, Eric, and I'm sorry I don't say things very quick anymore. But I think that you look at a guy like Howie Roseman in Philadelphia. I think he's the younger version. I think is what Jerry Jones was in the early 1990s. I think when Jerry was up to his eyeballs in debt and trying to pay off bills and all that, Jerry was doing everything he could to make this team relevant. He was wheeling, he was dealing, he was trading Herschel Walker, he was hiring Jimmy Johnson. I mean, he was doing everything in his power to make his team better. Trading for signing Deion Sanders, or trading for the edge rusher from the 49ers. I mean, he was doing everything in his power to go and try and make this team better. And now it's a little bit not that factor anymore. That's not what we're doing anymore here. But Howie, the way he operates, kicking the can, setting up contracts, trading, moving up and down the board, signing guys, going out and getting coaches, firing coaches. He's kind of reminds me of the 1990s version of Jerry Jones that I used to compete against in Green Bay that was kicking our ass every year.
Yeah. Hungry, wanting to win at all costs.
Hungry, desperate. Yeah, just fighting, backed in a corner. It's a different ball game now for him.
And that version of Jerry was willing to put football people in positions to make the football decisions.
Absolutely.
And then eventually he got sick of that. Bye-bye Jimmy Johnson. And now Jerry runs the show, even though he's not actually a football guy. And so he doesn't really have the football plan in place, and he's just outsourcing to all the people that are around him. And whoever talked to him last is where he's going to go with it. And the priorities are not winning anymore. It's Jerry making money, having fun, being in control, and he'd rather be in control and lose doing it his way than put a Jimmy Johnson in place to go take this thing on another dynasty. And that's frustrating. And that's why the fans are frustrated. And Stephen Jones is putting air quotes around the 30-year drought that we talk about, that people say, acting as if it's just like we're concocting something out of thin air. Like it's frustrating. Their whole process is frustrating. And I think there's a lot of things to like about Brian Schottenheimer. But that if they were serious, I mean, nobody else was interviewing Schottenheimer. Yeah. Nobody else was. He wasn't a commodity. If you were serious about winning, and winning at all costs, you're probably not going with Brian Schottenheimer right now. That's a fair thing to say. But hopefully it works out, and he's an awesome guy. We love being around him. In training camp last year, sitting down with us on the fan, really enjoyed the conversation. I understand why the guys buy in and love him, and you saw Dak and a bunch of players at the introductory press conference yesterday, so that obviously speaks well of him. But we'll see what type of staff he puts in place. You're listening to the Love of the Star podcast, Love of the Stars and Odyssey podcast, and you can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. Now, let's look at the defensive side of things now here, Broadus, with it looks like Matt Eberflus, Bears head coach, gets fired, used to be on staff with the Cowboys, had some pretty good defenses in Indianapolis as their defensive coordinator. Looks like he's going to be the guy to replace Mike Zimmer. And then special teams, we got to touch on that as well. But what do you think about the Eberflus potential?
Yeah, I really do. I was at DallasCowboys.com when Eberflus was there. He was actually brought in during the Rob Ryan administration. And matter of fact, when Rob Ryan got let go and then you had Rod Marinelli come in, he adapted, and I give Flus a lot of credit. He adapted to what Rod Marinelli was doing and what Rob Marinelli was teaching, and him and Chris Richard, Jerome Henderson, those guys did a really, really nice job of learning, and Matt was very adaptable. Wherever he's been, the defense has played pretty well. The Bears defense, they were really good in their secondary last year, but that's where I think that, again, it talks about familiarity. This is one of those familiarity situations that I kind of approve of. Would I've loved for Mike Zimmer to stay? And yeah, I'd absolutely love to what Mike Zimmer. I'm a big fan. Everybody knows Mike Zimmer. I was talking to Mike. Mike was just so disappointed that he got passed over for the head coaching job. He's like, Brian, I've worked for 6 of the 10 head coaches that have been for the Dallas Cowboys, and every time I get passed over for the opportunity, and so he's no ill will towards Brian Schottenheimer, but just ill will towards like, damn, what do I have to do to even get an interview for this thing? So anyway, we'll see how the thing with Flus works out there. There's a couple of guys to keep in mind there. They interviewed Andre Curtis, who was with Eberflus in Chicago. They interviewed him for the job. It sounds like they're going to continue to keep looking. John Hoke was on that staff with the Bears. I don't know. He was really the main secondary coach for the Bears. I don't know if he's coming to Dallas. I don't think that's going to be the case. So we'll see how that plays. But we need to keep an idea on a guy. There's a nickel corners coach named David Overstreet that I'm hearing some things about there. So I think that Eberflus is going to get this job, and then we'll see if in fact that Curtis and Overstreet are part of. I'd like to see Jeff Zugina, who was brought in. Really, Jeff Zugina was as the defensive line coach. He stayed on. He and Greg Ellis. Jeff stayed on. Jeff got this job because Ron Rivera interviewed for the defensive coordinator job, and Rivera, I guarantee you, told Jerry and Steven, "Hey, if I come along, this is the defensive line coach I'm going to bring along." Well, look what happened with Jeff Zugina and Greg Ellis. This defensive line played better. You look what Mozzie Smith improved a little bit there. You look what Golston was able to do. Oso Diggy. They get Carl Lawson in there immediately, and he starts playing well. Nealon, as the injury was he was dealing with injury throughout the season. But you saw what Jeff Zugina and then also that Greg Ellis were able to do as the defense. So maybe those guys will be part of this mix. If like I say, when they name Eberflus the guy. I will say this too about and you mentioned the special teams coach. If I could circle over to that direction, if I could.
Yeah. What's the plan there?
Nick Sorensen. Yeah, Nick Sorensen was the. He was a coach that Schottenheimer's familiar with Nick Sorensen. He's been with him in a couple of different spots. He's been kind of a special teams coach, a defensive backs coach. He got the coordinator's job in San Francisco. A lot of injuries over there, a lot of problems. I mean, it just wasn't as good as it needed to be, or we've seen from the 49ers in the past. But I was talking to some guys around the league that have been with this guy, and everybody was telling me that he's just a really, really good coach and a really good person. And this kind of goes back to what Schottenheimer said yesterday about him being a people person, him being able to be a people person. And it sounds like that Nick Sorensen's that kind of guy. I heard he's smart. I heard he's thoughtful with people. The players in the building really, really like him from the couple of people that I talked to, and he'll connect to them. And like I say, the coaching part of it, he's kind of stood up as a defensive coordinator. He stood up as a special teams guy. So he's familiar with, how those dynamics work, because your special teams coach is huge, because the special teams coach, he honestly coaches all the team. You got guys that are linemen on the field goal team. You got defensive players that are on the punt return. You got, everybody, wide receivers are involved. Quarterbacks hold the ball occasionally. Everybody's affected by the special teams coach. So you better have somebody that has those people skills, but also can get these guys to execute at a very high level.
Yeah. Sorensen was a guy that played, many years in the NFL, being a core special teams dude. He got the call up to defensive coordinator with the Niners last year. Certainly didn't work out in his favor.
Yeah. Probably wasn't ready for that one. But they tried.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. So hopefully getting back into the special teams realm, if that's where the Cowboys decide to go with this thing, then, hopefully, Bones Fossil, I was kind of ready to see him get up out of here anyways, to be quite honest with you. He was kind of a wild animal, some of the stuff that he was doing. So Sorensen, that's good. I think the Eberflus stuff is interesting. I'm like you. I would have preferred the idea of Zimmer being able to stay.
Sure,
they could have found a way, because
he just didn't want to stay. Not working under the Schottenheimer regime. No.
Yeah, honestly, in a perfect world, if this is the way, like whittling it down to what the options really were. Like, could you have just made Zimmer the head coach? Schottenheimer's the play caller. You keep the continuity more so on both sides of the ball because now you're changing the defense once again. Ton of respect for Matt Eberflus as a defensive mind for sure. And now he's a guy with some head coach experience to, maybe help things out a little bit, even though from a game management standpoint, we know that we don't want him making any timeout decisions during the game. But
yeah, what's interesting, Eric, that I wonder if, and I'd heard some whispers, and again, these are just whispers that Stephen Jones, after the Green Bay game of last year, was considering moving on from Mike McCarthy then. And then that would have been interesting to see, because I know that Dan Quinn was well liked by Stephen Jones, by Will McClay. Was this something that Jerry did not want to do at the time? And instead, Stephen, stepped back, allowed Jerry to make the call on that one. And so maybe this is what we're getting now, that Will and Stephen were really, really interested in Schottenheimer. Jerry probably wanted to go a new route. And, last year that, Stephen reminding Jerry that, listen, last year we talked about this. We lost Dan Quinn. You saw what happened there. I just wondered if we all got Jerry and Stephen in a room and we're kind of having some, dinner or something, they would admit, yeah, we should have never let Dan Quinn walk out of this building. We should have just went ahead and moved on from Mike and then hired, and then got, but that's the way this thing works right now. It's kind of interesting if that's really how it might have played out. But in fact, Dan Quinn's now, doing a great job with the Commanders.
Yeah. And we know Jerry's not trying to pay a coach to not work, so that was probably a sticking point. When I brought that up, there were people that reached out to me on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, and said Jerry just does not want to pay two coaches. I think Stephen would have been okay with that, just for this 1 year and then move on. Dan Quinn was well liked in that building, but and I think, to me, the scouting department, they don't have a problem with Schottenheimer. They really, really don't, so that's going to be really, really key. They don't have enough picks. What's going to happen is they're going to lose players, but they're going to have to rally with their pro department, and hopefully things will change a little bit different, that they can find some money. I don't think they're going to be active in the first day of free agency, but we'll see what happens the day 2, day 3, day 4. Well, if you're a linebacker on this team and Eberflus is here, I think that's something that should be exciting for you with his track record of turning linebackers into some studs.
Yeah,
his history as a linebackers coach there. So I know he's not, at least his past indicates he's not quite as aggressive as Mike Zimmer, perhaps. I know, like, the third and long stuff, like, Zimmer is just when you get to third down, especially third and long, Zimmer's got you crushed. And I think that was something that the Bears struggled with last year.
Yeah.
But overall, the Bears numbers defensively, their EPA and things like that defensively were so much better while Eberflus was there. When Eberflus gets fired and now they're playing without him, the defense took a turn for the worse for the Bears. So as you try and connect things and see the value of Matt Eberflus, there are definitely things that he does extremely well, but it is going to be very different from what Zimmer wanted to do. So I'm interested to see what his archetypes are for his positions, especially as we gear up towards draft time now, free agency time. What's the height, weight, speed of guys that he likes for each position? And I know the under front is something that he really emphasizes. So that 3 technique spot, that Osa Odighizuwa spot, what happens with him? Is he going to be priced out of the Cowboys? How do you replace Osa? So many questions now as they try to revamp this defense with a new coordinator. I'm looking forward to seeing how they go about it.
Yeah, if you go Mason Graham, defensive tackle from Michigan, I know that would drive everybody's heads about to explode when I say Michigan defensive lineman, but that's the best one in the draft. Maybe I don't know how this guy gets to you at 12. I think he's more of probably a top 8 type of a player. So, boy, I'd say it'd be nice to have a guy like that, a big body 3 technique that is very disruptive. So you're absolutely right about your descriptions of what Matt's going to need.
Yeah, I mean, I saw some of the advanced stuff. I saw the pass rush win rate stuff for Mason Graham, and I know you like him quite a bit. I mean, he's been very, very impressive with being able to win on the pass rush. I'm looking here. I mean, Mason Graham, 14% career pass rush win rate according to Pro Football Focus. Only drafted defensive tackle since 2017. Higher in the database would be a Christian Barmore, Quinnen Williams, Byron Murphy, Jalen Carter, and then Mason Graham's right there. So that's a guy that can really get after you. I haven't watched the tape. I know you have. I'd be surprised based on the way you talk about him if he could actually fall to the Cowboys at 12.
Yeah, I think that's going to be very difficult. But we hold the hope of the CD Lamb draft of when we kept doing mock drafts and CD Lamb was there at 17 and we'd have to start it over. Because teams do make mistakes. I will say this though, Eric, and one of the reasons why I don't think he'll be there. They're going to look for clean players. They're going to look for players that are clean, health-wise, character-wise. I'm just talking about all the teams. There's so much unknown right now about the top 10 picks in this draft. There really is a lot of unknowns, and I think people are going to be hunting the best players that they can. Of course, that's what you do when you draft. But man, there are going to be some teams that are going to draft some guys, and when we talk about them, we're going to be that's good, and let's just hope that Dallas is not one of those teams that takes somebody where we kind of go, oof, I don't know if I'd have done that. That's what Dallas does. That I mean, Dallas just can't afford any really missed picks. They just can't afford to waste any. They've already allowed a 4th round pick to be moved on. You've got to find a way to maybe recoup. If you have to trade back a couple of spots, get the 3 like you did with Detroit last year. I could feel so much better if I knew I had 2 third-round picks and I don't have a 4th. I would feel a lot better about my situation. But there's ways to navigate it. They just need to make sure all the picks hit.
Okay, you're listening to the Love of the Star podcast. Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast, and you can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. Let's put a bow on this bad boy. Looking at the Shrine Bowl, Senior Bowl, what do you got your eye on with some of these prospects here this week, Broadus?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, though, the Senior Bowl has a little bit better roster in the terms of the guys that are more like the day 1, day 2 type of guys. The East-West game is more like a day 3 variety to it. So, yeah, it was a great opportunity. Really happy that our colleague, our teammate there, Zach Wolchuk, and my colleague too, Lach Lombardi, are getting the eyes on it. I'm looking forward to his reports today on how the final practices where we got a game on Thursday. So these All-Star games are really a lot of fun. It's really the first opportunity for scouts. Maybe you're a West Coast scout. Now you're at the Senior Bowl and you're now looking at some players that were East Coast schools. So it's the first time to put your eyes on some of these kids from Penn State or from Florida or places like that. So these bowl games are very, very beneficial. The interview process is huge. You make a lot of connections at these bowl games, and then you come back at the combine. These kids remember talking to you. Now you get them to open up a little bit more. So these bowl games, as I keep saying, is a huge part of what they do. They always say that the draft begins in Mobile. Well, it surely does in a lot of ways, and I'm really excited to see these games being played again on Thursday and then on Saturday as the bowl game, as the All-Star Games season will come to an end, and then we focus then on getting in and starting to do some work on the actual draft of building boards, and then the combine will be here before you know it, and that's a whole nother project that we have to work on. But it's I think we're inside of 90 days. I think we're well inside 90 days for when the NFL draft's going to be. So a lot of work still to be done, but we're going the right way.
I see that twinkle in your eye. Offseason time.
I love this time. You know what? I this is my favorite time of the year. I really playing games is hard. I said this would be the greatest job ever if you didn't have to play games. If you could just pick players and okay, on paper my team's better than your team, we win the championship. All right, let's do this again. But I love this. I love this. And as you can see over my shoulder, if the people are watching the video, I've got my picture of me with a Super Bowl trophy. And that's really what it's all about right there. All the work that these guys and gals put in on a yearly basis to try and win the Vince Lombardi trophy but it's all about scouting too. Coaching, scouting, and just damn good execution if you can.
That's right. The chase for the Lombardi is on. Brian Broaddus, your time to shine. Love of the Star podcast. Another episode in the books. We'll be back later on this week, and looking forward to all the scouting reports, all the conversation after Shrine Bowl, Senior Bowl, and then looking ahead to the Combine. We're in the thick of it right now. Broaddus, you're the man. We appreciate it, and we'll see you this week.